The wind carried no sound that day, only the echo of hooves long vanished. She stood barefoot on the ridge, her hair undone by the storm, a gold ring too large for her fingers slipping toward the earth. Behind her, the cabin smoldered. Ahead, the trail forked, one path to the past, one to the secret she'd never meant to uncover. He had lied with such gentle eyes. Beneath the hem of her wedding skirt, something darker bloomed. Regret, maybe, or memory. She clutched the leather pouch tight against her ribs, the one she'd found hidden beneath his floorboard. It had changed everything. A receipt. A name that wasn't hers. A sketch of a horse. And a price. They'd traded her. Not just for labor, not even for love, for a stallion with a black mane and one blind eye. The storm cracked open the sky. She didn't flinch. She'd already unraveled too much to fear the thunder now. Subscribe now, the voice murmurs, soft as smoke, because tomorrow's story will haunt you even deeper. You'll need it. But before that, let me take you to the day it all began, before the veil, before the ring, before she knew the truth. She was just a girl in a borrowed dress, handed down like an heirloom no one wanted anymore. And when he came riding into town, all the women whispered about his charm, his silver, his saddle carved in bone. No one warned her about the blind horse. No one warned her about the secret he kept buried beneath the ashwood floor. They called it Lantern Creek, though neither lanterns nor creeks had run through the town in years. Just dust. Endless, blinding dust that danced like ghosts through the alleys and clung to every window pane like a warning. Wooden buildings leaned sideways like they were tired of pretending to stand. The church bell hadn't rung in months, its rope frayed and split like a promise never kept. And the saloon doors, once swinging with laughter and boots, now groaned with the weight of silence. Everyone here was waiting for something. Rain, redemption, or an easier death. And then there was her, Mara. She walked with a limp no one asked about anymore. The children stared when they thought she couldn't see, and the men looked away like she reminded them of something they wanted to forget. The women were kinder in words, crueler in tone. They'd say, "Poor thing," and then spit in the dirt. Once she'd passed. She worked at the edge of town, mending clothes for folks who never said thank you and watching the horizon like it owed her something. Her little house had one room and no porch. Just a broken rocking chair and a withered daisy she kept watering, as if hope could still root in that soil. No one came to call. No one ever had. They said she was cursed. That she brought bad luck to any man who touched her. That her first husband died the night after their wedding, bitten by a snake in bed. That wasn't true. Not exactly. He hadn't died that night. Just changed. But stories grow like weeds in dry places, and the truth is easier to bury than to tend. After he left, she stopped speaking for a time. Not out of grief, but because silence felt safer. Her voice returned slowly, like a stray dog unsure of welcome. Now, it was soft, measured, rare. Folks got used to not hearing from her. Some even preferred it that way. Every Thursday, Mara brought in the laundry from the town's boarding house. She'd sit with her back to the window, humming half-songs to herself, mending sleeves and soles alike, though no one would have given her credit for either. That's when she first heard the whispers. "A buyer," someone said outside the store. No, a traveler, rich, riding a black horse. Alone? Always. Mara didn't look up. Men came and went like summer storms, loud, dangerous, gone before they meant anything. But still something shifted in the room, like the walls inhaled. Later that week, she saw him. He rode into town without a coat, despite the chill, and his smile bent like moonlight through a cracked mirror. The horse was real. Midnight-colored, scarred across the flank, and blind in one eye. Mara noticed that before anything else, the stranger tipped his hat to everyone and spoke like he'd lived there once, though no one remembered his name. Some said he'd made his fortune in silver. Others claimed he dealt in secrets, not coins. But none of that mattered, because he looked clean, and in Lantern Creek, clean meant power. By Sunday, he'd rented the old cabin on the hill. By Monday, the girls at the saloon were taking turns bringing him pies. Mara never joined them, but she noticed how his gaze didn't linger, how his boots made no sound, how the horse never flinched near fire. Some things are too quiet to trust. One evening near dusk, she found a letter tucked under her door. No name, just a scrap of paper folded into a tight square. I saw you watching. Come talk to me. I won't bite. There was no signature, but there was the faint smell of leather and ash. She didn't go. Not that day. Instead, she sat by her fire, running her fingers over the scar at her hip, an old wound from falling through thin ice as a child. Her leg never healed right, and ever since, she'd limped like the earth had one secret too many to carry. She remembered her mother whispering prayers no one taught her. She remembered how her father left before she could walk again, and she remembered the way the town changed once she grew into a woman, with different eyes and careful hands and a name no one ever said kindly again. Mara knew better than to follow strange men with kind letters, but curiosity is a silent thief, and by the second letter, she'd already left her door unlocked. They met by the old chapel ruin. He said his name was Ellis, said he traveled for work, never said what that work was. His voice was warm, his smile not quite full. He didn't ask about her limp, didn't flinch when she didn't speak for the first 5 minutes, just waited. That patience scared her more than his horse ever could. Weeks passed. They walked together sometimes, him talking, her listening. Her silence didn't seem to bother him. It almost seemed to comfort him. Until one day, without a word, he offered her something, a paper, folded neatly, a contract. At first she thought it was for land or labor, or something else men bartered over. But no, her name was written at the top, his signature at the bottom, and next to it, the price. 1 black stallion, broken in, blind in one eye. Mara didn't understand, not at first. He smiled again, softer this time. I can give you a home, he said. A new name, a clean story. She looked down at the paper. It looked more like a receipt than a promise. But she'd been alone so long that even a bad ending felt better than no story at all. So she said yes. And the town, they celebrated like a storm had finally passed. No one asked questions. No one saw the way her hands trembled when she signed, or the way Ellis's horse stared into the firelight, like it remembered something too. The wind changed on a Tuesday. It wasn't the kind of change most would notice. Not a storm, not a temperature drop, just a shift, subtle, but certain. The dust didn't swirl the same. The crows stopped flying west. Even the church bell, long still, gave a hollow clang in the breeze like it remembered how to mourn. Mara felt it before she saw him. She was hanging linens in the yard behind the cabin, white sheets fluttering like ghosts in a dream. Her ankle ached. The air tasted different, and not just from the wood smoke Ellis had burning in the hearth. She paused, clothespin in hand, and turned. He stood just beyond the fence. Not Ellis, not a townsperson, a stranger. He wore no hat, though. The sun bit hard. His coat was plain, travel-worn, dust on the boots, pale scar on the jaw. He didn't look rich. He didn't look poor either. Just unfinished. His gaze met hers and stayed. Not searching, not staring, just seeing. She blinked first. He nodded, polite. No smile. Then turned and walked off like he hadn't come for anything after all. But he had. She knew. That evening, Ellis didn't come home for supper. It wasn't unusual. He claimed to meet buyers, claimed to have business in towns further west. He never explained what kind. She never asked. A quiet agreement between them. She wouldn't pry, and he wouldn't lie too well. Still, his absence echoed. She sat by, the fire alone, mending a shirt that didn't need fixing, replaying that glance through the laundry line. Not just the way the stranger looked at her. The way he didn't flinch, didn't pity, as if he knew she wasn't something broken. Just paused. The next morning, Mara went to town to fetch salt and thread. Her limp felt heavier, though the pain was the same. She blamed the weather. She always did. Whispers followed her like shadows. "Did you see him?" Said he was looking for a place to rest, maybe buy a horse. He looked at Mara like he knew her. She kept her eyes low, shoulders forward. At the mercantile, the owner's wife gave her a look. Not cruel, not kind, just curious. "Strangers, asking questions," she said, tapping flour into a bag. "About folks who live on the hill. Said he's a historian, or a collector, I forget which." Mara didn't answer. Paid in coins, left without a word. That night, she watered the daisy again. It was already dead. Days passed, then a week. She saw the stranger again outside the chapel ruin, brushing dirt off a stone marker. Not a grave, just a rock weathered by time and wind. A child's name almost worn away. He looked up, didn't smile, didn't leave, so she didn't either. They sat, 10 feet apart. No words. The silence wasn't awkward. It breathed. She noticed how he kept one hand always on his satchel. Not possessively, protectively. As if it held something not worth stealing, but worth remembering. He noticed how she flinched when the wind blew too fast. After a while, he spoke. "Just once. You never belonged here, did you?" It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. The town noticed. People talk when silence shifts, the same way they talk when rain hits dry earth, not because it's dangerous, but because it means change. And change, in Lantern Creek, was always unwelcome. They saw Mara walking slower now, but straighter. They saw the stranger watching the hills, eyes narrowed like he could see something buried beneath them, and they began to mutter. Ellis returned one night without warning, his hand smelling of horses, and his coat wet with creek. "Water, you been wandering?" he asked her, eyes not angry, but sharper than before. "No." He nodded, lit a pipe. Watched the smoke rise and didn't press, but she could feel it, the pressure building, the wind ready to turn again. The stranger came to her cabin 2 days later, didn't knock, just stood at the gate. Hands folded, she met him outside. No words passed. He reached into his satchel, pulled out a folded paper. Yellowed, fragile. He handed it to her and left. It was a page from a ledger. Her name, the date of the transaction. But the buyer wasn't Ellis. It was someone else. A man who died years ago. Someone the town said vanished without a trace, and next to his name, in delicate script, transfer of property to E. Rains, no witness required, Ellis Rains. She stared at the paper for a long time, then burned it, not out of denial, but because she didn't need proof anymore. She needed clarity. The storm rolled in the next evening. No rain, just wind. Loud, howling, angry. Mara stood at the window, watching the horse, Ellis's horse. It paced in the yard, its blind eye turned toward her as if seeing more than it should, and in the shadows of the trees, the stranger, just standing there, still, waiting. She didn't tell Ellis, but he knew. He always knew when someone was getting too close. In town, the preacher locked his doors. The saloon girls stayed upstairs. The school teacher took the children home early and didn't come out the next morning. Something was shifting and everyone could feel it. The stranger no longer asked questions. Now, he listened. And Mara began to remember things she hadn't allowed herself to remember. Like the man Ellis never talked about, the one who owned the horse before him. Like the way the floor creaked in one particular spot in the cabin, even when no one was walking. Like the pouch of coins Ellis kept hidden in the rafters, stamped with a foreign seal. Like the way her name wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to someone else's story now, and she was ready to reclaim it. One night, Mara left the door open, just wide enough. The wind caught it, rattled it, pushed it further. Ellis stirred in his sleep, didn't wake. She stepped outside barefoot. The stranger waited by the fence. She didn't bring anything with her, no bags, no shoes, just her limp, her silence, her truth. They didn't speak. He held out a lantern. She didn't take it, but she followed the light. Behind them, the wind closed the door, and the cabin, for the first time in years, finally slept without her. The snow came early that year, uninvited, unannounced. Lantern Creek wasn't used to white, dust, drought, even flood, those it understood. But snow was something foreign, clean, cold, honest. It silenced the world in a way nothing else could, and it was under that silence that everything finally broke. It began with a dress, a gift, Ellis called it. Silk, wrong color, too tight. Left on the bed without a note. He never said why, never said where it came from. But the next morning, she saw the preacher's wife in town, watching her with narrowed eyes and a whisper ready on her tongue. She heard the words, took what wasn't hers, heard the lies bloom like weeds. She tricked him. She's dangerous, a snake in lace. They laughed in the saloon when she passed. Even the girls who once brought Ellis pies turned their backs now. As if shame were contagious, as if she'd done something to deserve it. Ellis didn't deny it. He stood in the yard that evening, arms crossed, watching her like she was a mule that needed breaking. "You're not who they think you are," he said. She stared at him, the snow gathering on her shoulders like dust from another grave. "No," she whispered, "I'm not." His eyes narrowed. "You'll stay put, until this blows over." She didn't answer, just turned, and walked. She didn't pack a thing. The cold didn't bite, it burned. She walked until the lights of town faded behind her and only the trees whispered her name. Her dress wasn't meant for winter. Her boots cracked at the seams. Her leg ached with every step, but she welcomed the pain. It reminded her she was still moving, still choosing. The snow deepened. Her limp worsened. Then, finally, she fell. Not hard. Not dramatic. Just a slow collapse, like the body had made a quiet decision before the heart could disagree. She lay there, in the hollow of a dead tree's shadow, the sky above her endless and gray. She didn't cry, but she did whisper, to no one in particular. "I just wanted to belong." She didn't hear his footsteps, didn't feel his hand until it touched hers. Light, not urgent. He didn't lift her, just knelt, beside her, silent. When she finally looked up, his face was half shadowed by the lantern he'd set in the snow. The stranger. He didn't speak, just offered his coat, not draped over her like a savior, but folded, waiting. For her. To choose. She took it. And when she stood, he didn't hold her, but he didn't let her fall again. They didn't go far. An old miner's hut, broken but still sheltering, stood a mile off the trail. He'd cleaned it out, it seemed, cleared the dust, set a fire, left nothing sharp in corners. She sat near the hearth, hands trembling near the heat, watching her breath leave her body in small clouds. He boiled tea, left it beside her, said nothing. The silence stretched like thread between them. Finally she spoke. "They turned on me." He didn't nod. Didn't say, "I know." That would have made it about him. Instead, people fear what they recognize but can't name. She looked at him, puzzled. He met her eyes. "You remind them of themselves, and they hate you for it." She didn't know if that was true, but it felt like it could be. He stayed that night, not close, not far. When she dreamed, he didn't wake her. When she wept, quietly, he didn't ask why. But she noticed his hand resting gently on the floor beside hers, fingers barely touching the hem of her skirt, like he was asking permission without words. And in the morning when she woke, she found bread by the fire. And a note. "You are not theirs to name. If you leave, I understand. But if you stay, I'll walk beside you, nothing more." She stayed, not for warmth, not for safety, But for the first time in years, she didn't feel watched. She felt seen. Later that day, she returned to the cabin on the hill, alone. Ellis wasn't there. She knew where he kept his papers. She knew what lay beneath the floorboards. Now, the ledger pages, all of them, folded, marked, signed by hands not hers, a book of women, dates, prices, transfers. She wasn't the first, but she would be the last. She didn't take the book, just one page, the first, her name, and a single line. Scrawled in newer ink, final trade, unreturnable. She folded it, slipped it in her coat, and walked back into the snow. The stranger waited in town by the chapel ruin. She sat beside him this time without flinching. "Why me?" she asked. He looked out at the snow falling through the broken roof. "Because I've seen what people throw away when they think no one's looking. And I've never seen anything like you," she scoffed. But something inside her softened, not melted, just thawed. He turned to her, face open, voice low. "I know you don't trust easily. You shouldn't. But I'm not here to fix you, just to walk beside you, however far you let me." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her hand reached for his, not for support, for witness, and he held it, not like a possession, like a promise. They left the next week, not in secret, not in shame. She walked through Lantern Creek with her chin lifted, her limp steady, her eyes forward. Ellis never stopped them. Maybe he saw her. Fire was no longer for sale. Maybe he knew the wind had changed for good. Maybe he just didn't dare. The townsfolk watched from behind windows. No one spoke, no one dared. But one child waved, and that was enough. Out past the ridge, she stopped once, turned back. The cabin was a smudge in the distance now. The saloon just a glint of glass. The chapel, only bones. She breathed deep. The snow fell softer out there, no echoes. No names, just space and sky. And a man who didn't walk ahead, didn't drag behind, just stood beside her, waiting. And together, they moved forward. They thought she was broken. But someone saw gold in the ashes. The land they found wasn't much, not at first. A sloped valley, more rock than soil, wind-scoured and stubborn. Trees leaned like they'd considered leaving but changed their minds. The old barn had no roof. The well ran dry, but the view stretched for miles, and that, to Mara, felt like a kind of freedom. She stood on the ridge with the stranger. Now, no longer just a stranger, though she still didn't know everything about him. He let her name the place. She chose Ash Hollow, because sometimes, even after fire, things grow. The days passed slow and honest. They built with bare hands, not plans. Hammered fence posts under red dawns, cleared brush while the crows watched, dug the well deeper until water finally came up cold and clean. She found a half-wild mare in the hills, black as night with eyes like ember coals. Took weeks to get close, and longer to earn its trust. But one morning, the horse followed her, to the barn without rope or command. She named her Sable. "She's just like you," he'd said, watching from the porch. Mara smiled faintly. "No, she's gentler." He didn't argue, but he never looked at her like she was fragile, only like she was still becoming. At night, they sat by the fire. Real fire, not metaphor. Cedar logs crackling in a hearth they'd laid stone by stone. She told stories then, not all of them, not yet, but enough. About her mother's voice, about the time she fell from a tree and pretended she hadn't cried, about the way it felt the first time someone called her mine like it was a price tag. He listened the way good men do, not to reply, but to hold space. Eventually, he shared too. His name was Jonah. He'd once been a mapmaker, not for countries, for railroads, paid to carve lines across stolen land, paid to make sense of what was never his to name. He said he quit the day he watched a town rise over a graveyard no one bothered to mark. "I couldn't draw another line after that," he said. Mara understood. Some lines aren't meant to be. Crossed others aren't meant to be drawn at all. Their first real challenge wasn't a storm. It was a letter. Jonah found it tucked under a stone by the gate. No name. Just the wax seal of Lantern Creek. Inside, A warning. Return what isn't yours. No signature. But the handwriting was Ellis's. She burned the letter without a word. He didn't stop her, but that night she didn't sleep. Not out of fear, out of fury. I thought it was over, she whispered near the fire. I thought we were past it. Jonah stirred the coals slowly. We are. He's not. He still thinks I'm his. You know you're not. She nodded. But knowing doesn't quiet the echoes. He reached for her hand. Then let's build something louder. They expanded the barn, added 3 stalls, bought 2 geldings from a traveling trader and let Mara name them both. She chose Dust and Promise. They planted peach trees even though the soil didn't promise much. He wrote in the evenings again, journals, sketches, stories. She painted the doors a warm red, and for a time the world was gentle. Not perfect, but honest. The final challenge came with the thaw. Jonah returned from the ridge one afternoon, face tight. There's a man coming. Says he's a marshal. Her breath caught. For you? For both of us, maybe. She didn't ask why. He didn't explain. That night she sat on the porch alone while he packed a satchel. Not to run, but to be ready. He returned beside her quietly. Sat, waited. She turned to him, voice steady. If you leave, I won't stop you. I'm not leaving. He looked at her. But I need you to know, I've lied. Not about who I am, but what I did. She didn't flinch. He told her. About the man who went missing years ago. A land baron who claimed a river that wasn't his. About the villagers who protested. About the night Jonah stood between the baron and the burning homes. He raised a rifle. I raised a stone. Silence. I didn't check if he got up. Mara's throat tightened. Not with fear, but with understanding. She didn't speak right away. Then, we all did things to survive. He met her gaze. I don't want survival anymore, he said. I want to live. She nodded. Slowly. Then placed her hand over his heart. Then stay. And we'll face whatever's coming. The marshal arrived 3 days later, alone, on foot, with dust in his beard and old sorrow in his eyes. He didn't speak Jonah's name, didn't draw a weapon, just asked for water. Mara brought it. He drank, watched the land, watched them, then said, Men like us weren't made for stillness. Jonah nodded. Maybe not, but we try anyway. The marshal handed him a piece of paper. Case closed. No claim, no body, no witness. Then tipped his hat to Mara. Looks like he found what the rest of us never did. And left, just like that. That night, they didn't speak, didn't need to. They watched the fire together. She reached into her coat, pulled the old ledger page, the one she'd kept, held it to the flame, watched it curl and disappear. I'm not ashes anymore, she whispered. Jonah took her hand. No, he said. You're the spark. They never built a big ranch, but people came anyway. Drifters, dreamers, widows with nowhere left to go. Mara taught them to ride. Jonah taught them to map the stars. No one asked who you were before, only who you chose to become. And under the quiet sky of Ash Hollow, the wind no longer felt like judgment, only like freedom. They thought she was broken, but someone saw gold in the ashes. And from that fire, she rose, not saved, but seen, not claimed, but chosen. The letter came on the wings of spring, not from Ellis, not from the marshal, from the town itself. An invitation, scrawled in hasty ink, signed by, trembling hands, a festival, Lantern Creek Day. You're welcome to come, both of you, no apology, but something close. Jonah read it twice. Mara didn't read it at all. I don't need their bread or banners, she said, stacking firewood near the porch. He nodded, tying a rope at the corral. No, but maybe they need to see you're not afraid anymore. She looked up. The valley behind him rolled wide and golden. No, she said softly. They need to see I'm not theirs anymore. They arrived at dusk, rode into town together. Not side by side, but with her just ahead. Let them see that. Let them wonder. She wore no dress, no veil, no lace. Only her boots, her coat, and a strand of leather around her wrist, knotted 3 times. One for who she had been, one for who she had lost, one for who she had become. No one called her names. No one dared. The preacher's wife looked away. The blacksmith gave a small, silent nod. The saloon girl, the one with the tired eyes, smiled. Just a little. That was enough. At the square, music played. Children danced with wooden horses and ribbon sticks. Ellis wasn't there, but his house stood boarded and dark, like a mistake the town had stopped pretending to defend. Jonah bought 2 mugs of cider and handed her one. She held it, eyes fixed. On the fire pit in the center of town, flames licking the sky, orange and wild, he leaned in close. "We can leave whenever you're ready." She looked at him, truly looked, and then at the fire. "No," she said, "not yet." She stepped forward, and for the first time, she spoke to the people. Not for them, not against them, just to them. "I won't come back here again," she said. "Not because I hate you, but because I forgive you." Silence. Then, a whisper, from someone older. "You were never what they said." And another. She didn't burn. She bloomed. She turned to Jonah and reached for his hand, not in question, in answer. They left at midnight. The stars were wide open above the ridge, the moon like a coin in God's pocket. Neither of them spoke until the town lights were gone behind them. Then, she said, "I thought I'd feel smaller going back." He looked at her. "And? I feel bigger, like I outgrew it." He smiled. "You did." The next morning she opened the stable doors and Sable walked out without reins, brushing her nose against Mara's hand. Dust kicked his hooves like he knew something had shifted. Jonah saddled the wagon. Not to leave, but to build. He'd found wood from a fallen cherry tree, said it'd make a fine cradle. She didn't ask why, just smiled, and later by the hearth, she placed her hand over her belly. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. She nodded. "I think it's time," she whispered, "to name something after someone we lost." He didn't ask who, he didn't need to. 3 seasons later, under a night so clear it seemed lit from within, they stood together in the clearing by the peach trees. The orchard had bloomed against, all odd, crooked, stubborn blossoms clinging to rough branches. Their guests were few: the blacksmith, the saloon girl, the child who once waved goodbye, and in Mara's arms, a boy with coal-black hair and a quiet, watching gaze. They called him Ash, not for pain, but for what comes after it. There was no preacher, only the stars and the wind, and Jonah's voice, low and sure. "I never came to rescue you," he said. "Only to walk with you wherever you led." Mara held his hands, calloused and warm. "I was never lost," she said, "just waiting to be seen." And under the vast silence of the sky, they kissed, not like stories end, but like stories begin. They built no mansion, only a home with creaking floors, open windows, and a fire that never stopped burning. Not a blaze, not a fury, just warmth, steady, gentle, like her, like him, like the life they chose hand in hand, step by step in the snow and sun and everything between. She was never a curse. She was someone's miracle all along. Subscribe, and let me introduce you to the next miracle tomorrow.